Okay, well, welcome everybody on this June 8th, Monday evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order now, and it's 7:34. I'd like to just say this, that I'd like to keep this meeting running smoothly, efficiently, and on time as much as possible. I also want to recognize those residents and council members who showed up to support the Black Lives Matter and to protest the racial injustice. And hope that we can have some really good discussions about that in the coming weeks, if not even starting tonight, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, I'd like to ask now if there's any changes to the agenda. If I need to hear at least one yes, we'll go forward. If I don't hear any yeses, we're going to approve the agenda as is.
Yes, Kaki, this is Haley. I'd like to propose a change to the agenda.
All righty. And I've just reminded, I'm quite certain Andrea has told me, but everybody is here. There's Stephen. Just say yes, Stephen.
Yes. Here.
Mario. Gary
Yes.
Lee, you're here. Dan, you're here.
Yep.
Yes. And Phil? Is Phil on?
Go ahead. I'm here.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure everybody was here. Okay, Jerry Lee, yes, go ahead with the change.
Thank you. Mario and I conferred offline, and we'd like to propose a very brief discussion about whether the council would like to take action to not necessarily sort it all out tonight, but a discussion of a potential statement or proclamation regarding recent injustice, regarding fair treatment.
Okay, where would we like to put that?
I'm proposing it as a discussion item. That would be
Okay,
perhaps under new business.
okay. And if we do that, are there any residents prepared to speak tonight on Black Lives Matter or racial injustice?
Jackie, let me unmute. Okay, if anybody's on the phone,
Okay.
You're unmuted from this side, so you may want to mute yourself. So they're unmuted now.
Okay, before we place the agenda item by Jerry Lee and Mario, I'd like to know if there are any residents planning to speak tonight on the matter of Black Lives Matter and racial injustice or fair treatment. Are there any residents out there that are planning to speak tonight? Okay, no. All right, because that mattered to me, Jerry Lee, where we could place this.
Understood.
So, all right, so I think we'll just keep it in the order, and we'll put your topic as the first topic under new business. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
And would you give me the title of that, please?
Potential statement regarding fair treatment. Is that okay, Mario?
That's fine. Yeah, this should not be a long conversation. We wanted to just open it up for discussion briefly, and then we'll work offline depending on how we want to proceed.
Exactly.
Okay, great. All right, so you're going to be the first item under new business, and we're going to keep the same order of items as they're listed on the agenda. So I'm not moving I'm not moving items around, which I was prepared to do if we were going to have residents speak on this. Okay, with that addition to the agenda, is everybody in favor? I have to get at least one yes.
This is Phil.
Was
Yes.
that a yes? Okay,
Yes.
so let's do this. Who said yes? Phil said yes. Mario, you're on, yes. Jerry Lee, I'm sure you're on, yes.
Yes.
Stephen, are you on? Is that a yes, Stephen, with the change to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, and Dan, you are?
Yes.
Okay, so unanimously approved with that change to the agenda. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go to the approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? There's one yes.
This is
then
Jerry
we'll
Lee. I
open it
have
up.
changes.
What is it?
This is Jerry Lee. I have changes.
Okay.
So Andrea, thank you very much for the changes you added to the minutes based on my earlier notes. There were a couple more things that I think would be important to include. Under discussion of the reopening planning, I think it would be important to add a very brief sentence to indicate that the volunteer health expert committee did not fully stand. No further action is expected. Because to my understanding, that has not been otherwise denounced, so that would close out that action that had been mentioned in previous minutes.
Well, it actually, in the previous minutes, Jerry Lee, if I might speak to this, the two meetings that it was mentioned, one said we would see as things develop and if there were any differences coming out of the town office. And then the second meeting, it just said it was still forming. And it's to also understand that this was an informal, this was not a formal committee. It was just an informal group of volunteers, only a couple. So I don't think it rises to that recognition. It was informal.
Yeah, I understand that. The only thing is that where it was left in the minutes to say it was still forming, but we never closed it out. I just think that closure would be helpful for anyone trying to track it over the course of the minutes. I understand that it was informal, but where the last minutes indicated it was still forming, I just think a closeout statement would be appropriate.
So do you want an update on other things that were discussed about being done but haven't been done either?
Well, I think this was a committee that was requested by residents at the meeting, the first emergency meeting.
Sorry.
And we agreed to attempt it. And I understand that we didn't get enough, interest and involvement to carry it out. I don't think it's a major deal to put in the minutes a statement that it was announced that the committee had not fully stood up and no further action is expected.
Okay, so there was no committee. This was not a formal committee. It was not even going to be coordinated by the town office. And secondly, while there were a few people on the call that had asked for a group like this, there were plenty of other residents who said this was not necessary. So I really don't think it rises to that, Jerry.
I'd like to just check with the other council members if there's a majority that does not think that we need to close out this in the minutes, I will acquiesce.
So,
This is the rest of.
So Stephen, just a thought, this discussion the last couple of minutes doesn't really square with my recollection, and maybe my recollection is off, but I seem to remember that council in those meetings was not really in favor of having such a group do this sort of things and not wanting to add more confusion. And I remember Phil talking about, we don't probably want to put the town out there for liability if it's in conflict with what other governments above us are doing. I recall it being something that you, Kaki, wanted to proceed with, almost like a mayor's committee. I can't remember how it was phrased, but more so than the residents really requesting it. I think it was something that was kind of being discussed, but you wanted to push it forward, and I wasn't really opposed at that time and just never really got going. There wasn't really any clamoring for it beyond that, but that was my recollection. So I don't really see the harm in just noting that it's, it's not going to be expected to continue.
Right. I'm sorry, Steve. Can I speak? Okay. It wasn't me really pushing for it. There was one doctor, Dr. Friedman, who said, he could look up research. So I was willing to go see if anybody else, but it really wasn't. There were plenty of other people who didn't want it. There were council members who didn't want it. It wasn't that pushed. It was who was, was anybody interested? So that's kind of where it died.
This is Dan. I just had a question. Andrea, are we? I think I see the recording symbol, but is this meeting's being recorded?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Then I would make a motion to accept the meetings as is. I think we have the video of the last meeting. We'll have the recording of this discussion. If someone wants to track it, there's plenty of information. So I would just move forward with the minutes as they are so we can get to the agenda.
Okay.
Well, Dan,
Is
I
there
respect
anybody-
your point there, but listening to a long recording is not necessarily an acceptable form of information sharing. And having the meeting should cover substantive announcements.
Then you could put in the minutes for the next meeting, that for the first 15 minutes of this meeting, we discussed that topic, and it would be quite easy for someone to find. If you have a single note to add and you get that approval, great, let's do it. I just want to move forward, either way.
I thought it was a pretty minor correction. I sent it in writing in advance.
Yeah, it's pretty insignificant. I'd like to ask the rest of the council members, can we take a vote? Is there any other changes before we take a vote on the minute?
Yes, I have other
There's no
changes
other-
to the SRTS section as well. So I think that under the mayor's report, she also reported that there is still ongoing coordination to ensure ADA compliance at the corner of Oxford and Shelley. So I think that should be added. The mayor also reported that the contractor is undertaking additional protection measures to ensure tree root protection. I think that should be added. The mayor also reported that the only current changes to the SRTS plan contemplated for the Kenilworth segment of the SRTS project include a realignment related to a stone wall at 11002 Kenilworth, but no others are currently contemplated under the SRTS project. And then the issue of enforcement of parking on top of new sidewalks will be referred to the parking committee since no signage currently exists. That was also discussed and agreed to. And a no-cost change order extension of contract is under development with completion expected by early August. So I appreciate the additional things that you added in, Andrea, but I think these were all very important substantive parts of the mayor's update that should be included.
Can I guess maybe we should revisit what the minutes are, because I thought minutes were about actions taken, not necessarily discussion or things said, but actually like a record of actions or things like that. Because otherwise,
well, to me, Dan, these are actions. These are things that the town has either approved or is proposing to do with this project. And there's a lot of interest in the community about the progress of this project. We're not posting these matters of substance anywhere else publicly that I'm aware of right now. So I really think it's important for us to be more publicly transparent about this project for the citizens.
I'm not arguing transparency. What I'm arguing is if we're going to debate the minutes as to what's important, then we're going to, like, what if someone else thinks something else we talked about? So I guess my question is, what is the definition of what the minutes are? Because I would still say, in the spirit of transparency, there is nothing more transparent than a recording. This is the ultimate form of transparency. So I don't think anyone's—
I understand that, Dan, but listening to a recording for some of our residents who are not as good with technology and not as may have hearing loss issues, a recording is not an accessible option. We should provide information in multiple formats to make it as accessible as possible. All of the public, all citizens, not just those who can easily look up a recording online and listen to it.
That's awesome.
Isn't there another, I mean, are there other vehicles that this information should be shared? I agree with you earlier about, we're all in the same boat about communication and transparency. This word, and this is my first foray into this, is I'm worried that the minutes is going to turn into a translation and literally of the entire town council meeting, and we don't want it to be just literally just verbatim. So I just want to know where.
I don't think this goes to that length, but I tell you what, since I'm clearly the only one that feels this way, I will just publish these notes on the GPML and let it be at that. I mean, I wish that the mayor's SRTS written updates included these matters of substance. Usually they focus more on the process and the timing of the next, the next day of the next week's expected work from the contractors. And for these substantive changes to the design plan, it doesn't really give residents an update on that kind of progress. So
That's a very valid point, and I agree with that 100%, Jerry Lee. So, and maybe
Except this is khaki, it's not substantive changes, and we've had this discussion before. Also, Jerry Lee, I'm really reluctant to add some of the stuff because already it's changing. And that's what I'll be talking about tonight in my update. So as I get firmer information, I do put it out on GPML. And I have written specifically to some of these things to the Historic Preservation Committee and to Stephen and to Phil. So, you know, I am like literally putting stuff out almost every single week on what's going on. And as you all know, sometimes it's changing. So even now, as we talk about what might have been said a month ago, we're already changing some of that. It's not ending in August. Okay? I mean, if I had said that, I mean, it was originally, you know, sometime in June. So I can go over more stuff again tonight, which is my plan, but you know, I thought Andrea did a fine job of just highlighting some of the bigger areas so that are consistent. These aren't changing. The things that she highlighted aren't changing. Those are good. So does anybody else want any changes, or shall we just go to vote if there's any changes to the minutes right now? It's already 10 of 8.
This is Phil. I was just going to say that a lot of this stuff has gone out with the things you publish on GPML. I mean, there's constant updates from you on what's going on, and I'm sure you'll get some more updates tonight. But yeah, it's a fluid situation, and I think that you're doing fine giving updates there. That's where people should also be looking.
Okay. All right. We don't have any more discussion. Let's just take a vote. Is there any action here to go ahead and approve the minutes as they are, or do you want to approve with changes? So is there anybody who wants to approve the minutes as they are? Please say yes. Just anyone, yes?
Yes, this is Dan. I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Now, let's go down the line here. Dan, you say yes. Stephen, any changes or keep the minutes as they are?
I'd like to just say no on the minutes as is, but do we need a unanimous on minutes? I don't think that we do. I feel like we've been.
We have to have an approval of minutes. Yeah. So if you want changes to the minutes, it sounds like you're saying you do not want to approve the minutes as they are and you want changes, which means we then have to go into what those changes are.
Yeah. Well, I felt like the changes Jerry Lee suggested were valid, and I feel like we've been discussing this back and forth for 25 months. These minutes, they went from being 4 to 5 pages with, you know, kind of some views and omitting others and not really even-handed, and then the actions were buried into it. That was the reaction that led to, or the reaction to that was make them shorter, let's focus on the action. Now it almost went the other way, is where there's some description about some things where it seems like that is wanted to be in there by you, Kaki, and then other things are just kind of like just the action if you don't. So I just don't.
Now, Stephen, actually, I didn't ask for the summary. I think, Andrea, you may want to.
No, at first there was no.
Jerry Lee asked for something, and so this was the compromise. I think Andrea came up with.
Yeah, I just had
that's my point.
One sentence in there.
Yeah.
Originally.
Yeah, that's my point. There was nothing in there before. So
okay, and I'm
fine with letting these go by, but I feel like I'm tired of talking about this after 25 months. Like just do regular even hand minutes like everybody else in the world does. So
I don't know what that. Let me just say this. In the past, and Jerry Lee, you may not be aware of this, but when somebody has had their update from the previous meeting and there's some changes, it really has been where it's then been deferred to the person who gave that update to decide what kind of minutes they really, what they want to put in there, if there's requests for changes. So what I'm saying now is, since this was my update, I'm fine with the update that Andrea put in as a summary. I'm the one who gave the update. Now, we've had different things over the last few years where Stephen had an update that was very extensive on town hall. He went back and he made some little changes. People wanted some changes, but he was the one who ultimately, it was his update. He decided what he really wanted to say in terms of changing a minute. So that's where I stand with this. When somebody has an update and other people want to make changes to the minutes about that update, it ultimately will fall with the person who gave the update. That seems to be the most reasonable way to approach it. And I'm saying that I think that Andrea did a fine job with the level of summary that she gave. So I'm not looking to make any more update on this, to make any more change on this particular item. So Stephen, Dan said fine with the minutes as they are. Stephen, you're saying no.
I'll just let it go this month. I've
saying
done
no.
this many times, but I'll just let it go this time. It's like the fifth
What does
time
that
I've
mean?
done
Is
it.
that a yes or a no?
That's a yes. I mean, I'm sick of talking about it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, okay. And Mario, where are you? Is this a yes? Do you want the minutes as they are, or do you want to make changes?
Just leave as is.
Okay. And Phil?
I'm fine with them as they are.
Okay. So we have 4-1. So we will keep the minutes as they are. Okay. Thank you. Okay. It's 7:55. Presentations by residents. Are there any presentations by residents?
Is that
Okay.
time reserved for the variance hearing that's coming up next, or no?
No, the variance hearing is under action.
Got it.
Okay.
It's
thank
our
you.
first time.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I can't recognize the voices, but yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on.
Kaki, I'm gonna unmute the folks on the phone.
Okay.
So if you're on the phone, I'm unmuting you. So if you're muted,
Okay,
it's
great.
just because you've muted yourself. Okay, so anybody that's on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello?
can.
Oh, okay. Hi.
I can hear
This
you.
is Jenna
I don't know who
Goodenow,
it
Sheriff
is.
on. This is Jenna Goodenow, Sheriff. I'm on Albemarle. I'm actually on the
Okay.
phone on behalf of my son Atticus Goodenow, who could not attend because he is at work. I believe, Kaki, you responded to his email, but I didn't have a chance to see it. He proposed to talk with the town council or whomever he needs to talk to about doing a piece of artwork over the graffiti that was put in the parking lot by the train tracks. He wanted to do something that would support Black Lives Matter and didn't know how to go about that process. So we sent Elizabeth originally the email, and I guess it was forwarded on to you. I'm not sure who else, but he's at work until 9:30. So I'm not sure how we do this whole thing, but he's very serious about it, and he wants to do it before the first quarter of college, which starts in September. So I'm not, like, what are the steps and how do we proceed, or is this something that can even be done? I have no idea.
Okay, Jen, yeah,
Hello.
we loved Atticus's interest and even, kind of stepping forward to do something in support of the Black Lives Matter. You probably weren't on the beginning of this phone call meeting, but
No,
Jerry
I came
Lee
on about
and Mario,
7 minutes in, and you were discussing meeting minutes.
Okay, so Jerry Lee and Mario are going to have a talk about this under new business. And
Okay.
It's a way to just sort of start to see where the town wants to go. Andrea, do you want to fill Jen in on what we did do with the graffiti? I don't know.
Oh, I saw what we did. We covered it up.
So you know that so that the town staff painted over the graffiti already.
Yes, we've seen it.
Okay. And so now it's still sort of a interest of Atticus's to do something more. Is that what you're trying
Absolutely,
to say?
because it just, yes, to turn it into an actual piece of artwork, which is what Atticus is going to college for.
I see. Wait a minute. So what you're saying is what's been already painted over, you're looking at like just creating that as a, tabula rasa and just paint on top of it a mural
Yes,
on the
yes.
on the parking lot? Okay,
Yes.
let's have that discussion with all council and with Andrea as well. So if you want to just stay on and listen, I don't know if we'll get to that part, but because there's a lot of people who've been asking about different things that we might be able to do as a town. So if you don't mind hanging on, if we don't get to a specific answer tonight, we'll still keep talking about this and follow up with you, okay?
That sounds great. Atticus, doesn't have control over the work schedule, so.
Yep. Okay. All right.
Hey, Jen. Hey, Jen. It's just Mario. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I think the concept that Atticus wants to do this is fantastic. My initial reaction, of course, we're not going to have any decisions made tonight, but my initial reaction is that sort of would fall under the purview of like the Citizens Association, and maybe there's something like where there could be some sort of area set up where multiple people can get involved and something like that. And I don't, because the idea of beginning to have permanent art structures, we'd have to have
I don't think Atticus has an intention of it necessarily being permanent because, as we all know, paint fades. And I don't think Atticus would have a problem sharing the palette or the space with other people who had ideas if you wanted to do it in blocks or something along those lines. It's not, Atticus isn't doing this for himself. I mean, our neighbors across the street, we never think about it, but, Ashley approached us, and our neighbors across the street from us are African-American, and she was so upset she didn't know what to do with herself. And she rarely comes and talks to us about that kind of stuff. But because, and I don't mean to, put this out there like in a look at us kind of a way, but she came to us because as a gay couple, we've faced our own level of, exclusion and criticism and other things, not in our town per se, but in life in general. And Ashley trusted us with her feelings because of this, and it really affected Atticus. And Mario, as you know, Atticus used to be Emma. So my child is also a trans male child who's been on testosterone for the last year and takes inclusion and any kind of inequity personally and really wants to do something to make a difference, not just because it's something that drives him, but it's because it's our friends, they're like our family. And so this is really personal, and I'm sure that he would be thrilled with anything that you guys would probably come up with just to do something, to not just sit by,
No, I don't.
So I'm sorry to have gone on, but.
No, it's fine, Jen. Look, it's emotional, and I get it. I think it's fantastic, and it's just a question of what's the steps to take for that place. That's all, and I think we can.
Totally fine. And I'm happy to just sit here and listen.
Okay. And I'll just mention, Jen, I've talked with Susie Gifford, who does the Penn Place Art Gallery stuff with Vicki Bailey. So things are, there are people who are also, like you, looking for ways to show the support. And so we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll hear that from, when Mario and Jerry Lee get to have a chance to talk, okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. We are now at 8:03. We're trying to stay on schedule. So now it's action time for the variance at 47:05. Stephen, can you take it?
Yeah. Were there any more presentations, or was it just the one?
There had been none, and then Jen got back on. So here we go. So I don't think there are any.
I just unmuted. There was one more person that joined on the phone in the meantime, so I just unmuted them. So for everybody on the phone, you may want to mute yourselves, unless you have a presentation or comment.
Okay. We are moving on to the action item on the agenda for the variance request at 4705 Argyle.
Okay.
Go ahead, Stephen.
I'm gonna kind of blitz through this relatively quick. I have a lot of notes on this, but I'm gonna hit it pretty quick, and then we can go back with any questions. I forwarded pretty much everything I've had over time to the rest of the council members on this. So again, if there are any questions at the end, I'm happy to try to help. I'm pretty sure George Martin was on the line. He's willing to answer any questions we might have, and the owners, I believe, are online as well. if there are any questions for them. So in a nutshell, the owners are seeking a variance for a side setback on the north side of an addition. So it's planned on the back of their house. Two different designs were looked into. Their first design did not meet the Garrett Park ordinance. It had bumped out 2 feet on the north side, so it was within 8 feet of the property line instead of the 10 feet that's required by a GP ordinance. Even though it kind of busts that side setback for GP, it would meet the county. So if it was in White Flint Park, right around the corner, right past Kaki's house, it would be no issue. It's just a matter of the GP ordinance that comes into play. They were alerted to this by George and the Land Use Committee. So they proceeded with an alternate design that was less favored by the owners, that it meets the side setbacks. It just has a different design to it. So the first design basically has a new addition with a new gable end, like a triangular topped roof that kind of echoes the original house and bumps out slightly, kind of provides some relief in the planes of the side of that house. Design 2 does away with that. It really just takes the existing siding and stretches it backwards, and it puts a roof on the top. Very commonly, a way that's very commonly done for additions, where it turns in like a T to the existing house. So it's pretty, it's more of like a plain way to do it. Just some quick facts about the lot. It's outside the county master plan district, so it's not in the historic preservation district within county or within Garrett Park that requires a county review. However, the house does have historic value. It's one of the first 2 Chevy houses. It may even be the first one, and it still has the existing garage. It might be one of the only ones left, if not the last one left. And the entire town, as most people know, is listed on the historic district as a historic district on the National Register of Historic Places. So it's not as though that small section of town is historic and the rest of the town is not. The whole town has historic houses spread without. It's just the county only has a limited area that falls really under its purview for official reviews. So things outside of that district could be as much or more historic in actuality than things that are in it. The lot is adjacent to another lot with that also has historic value to the town. It has a grotto on it. So the grotto is a stone arch. There's a spring there that kind of starts there, goes underneath Rokeby, goes through Wells Park and across the railroad tracks. It was a stream back in the 1800s that kind of was planned as park area. And on part of that, where the Sun House is on the corner, that was a pavilion in the 1880s. And that was a spot where the builders of the town, they brought people in, they came in on railroad, they went to that pavilion for a big presentation. They also had big town meetings on that pavilion. It went away a long time ago, but there is some structure believed to still be on that lot as well. And that lot, is actually not a buildable lot because of an addition was put onto the house on the corner, needed to take a sliver of this grotto lot to be able to make its addition doable. So once that was done, it changed what existed as the width of that lot. So from the county's eyes, that lot is not a buildable lot. So we can't make it a buildable lot if they don't make it, if they don't consider it a buildable lot. So it's basically destined to be just woodland forever. And there's a heavily modified Chevy house to the south of that one, this subject house, and the 2 houses share a driveway. So that's basically the gist of the background on it. I did some looks through all the various reports that were put together, and looking into kind of what the council's responsibility is on weighing the a variance. Some just factors I saw is I feel like it has exceptional characteristic in that this is an intact Chevy house, one of the first 2 and possibly the first one built. Another factor is the existing house has unusually small dimensions for today's standards, but also for the standards of the 20s. So when the first couple of Garrett Park Chevy houses were built, the town was concerned about them and told the builder you had to A, make them bigger, and B, not build them on adjacent lots. So these are, I think, the only ones that were built that small and the only ones that were built on adjacent lots. You'll see a lot of others around that have like a blank lot in between. And then along those lines, the house is small in scale and it's relatively narrow width, around 32 feet, and the lot slopes upward behind it. So it kind of limits the amount of space that you can really build something that you don't see from the street if you're building it behind the house. lot of other Chevy houses you might see around town, they'll have like a slope down in the back, so you can build a 2-level addition and tuck it behind the house, like the one at Kenilworth and Strathmore is like that, and a couple others on Montrose are like that, as opposed to other ones where you have the lot slopes up behind it. So there's some also on Montrose that have that where you can really see the additions in the back because they poke up behind the house. I think there's even another one over on Rokeby that's like that, that's heavily altered. So that's a factor too that makes it, it's a peculiar difficulty of that lot. And there's just, again, like the limited buildable area. So it makes the plan options of that house limited because the area that you could build in is limited. So just probably a little bit important to note that the other options that were on the table for this, since it's not in a historic district for the county, is the house really is nothing to stop it from being torn down and replaced by a developer if somebody wanted to do that, or building a multiple story addition that is either above it or behind it that really pokes up and kind of loses the massing of the original house in the front of it. So those are just some of my analysis points on it. I think everybody has the other reports. And then I think I also hit the importance that importance to me at least, I only have 1 vote of 5, that there is the unbuildable lot next door. So the whole point of a side setback is really to maintain open spacing between houses. So if you have 10 foot on the side of one house and then 10 feet on the next house over, you can't really build a house that's within 20 feet of any other house. And in this case here with that empty lot, you're talking about 50 or 60 feet, maybe even more between this house and what the other house is over there. So even though it's a couple of feet closer to its property line, it's really going to be way more than what that goal is on the side setback. So overall, I feel like it's in harmony with the general purposes of the chapter, including especially the historic preservation elements. But and I don't really feel like it's in the contrary of the public interest. So it's kind of jumped around a little bit, but that's sort of my take on what the background is and sort of my points on it. Open it up to discussion. Any questions or comments by council members?
Excuse me, this is Phil.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. Go ahead, Phil.
So I guess one of the questions is on this application or on this evaluation, basically, you had said that there was, hang on a second, let me just quick find this again. When you went down through everything, you for evaluation of grounds for variance, you on item 2 does the unusual dimensions, shape, topography, or other exceptional characteristics prevent accommodation of the building sought to be erected if the setback requirements of section 402 are not strictly applied. And you had said no, the applicant has demonstrated that they can accommodate the plans within the confines of the side setback, so forth. And then they had also provided a updated plan which showed it didn't need a variance. So I'm a little confused here because first it needed a variance, and then it was no, we don't need a variance, and now I think we're back to yes, we would like to get a variance. So, yeah,
that report is not mine. That's you're probably referring to the Land Use Advisory Committee. That's George Martin put that together. So a lot of what they do, I have not issued a report that I sent out. It was written by me. So
I stand corrected. You're 100% correct. I made a mistake. It was from George Martin.
Yeah,
correct.
And the Land Use Committee usually they talk about just kind of just straight up versus the regulations can it be done or not. My analysis, I was just reading off my own document that I didn't really share out yet. So I just had a different take on that one, that it is difficult to build behind it just because the house is so small. I mean, you can physically build behind it, but can you really build something that's behind it that is in keeping with the historic character of Garrett Park? And to that question, I feel like it's a no. So
why didn't, I guess I would ask the homeowner why, or whoever, why wasn't a variance submitted in the beginning? Because now we're 3 months later, and they had submitted a plan that was obviously workable. So what's changed, I guess?
Hi, Councilmember. This is Jessica Trin and Sean Bailey. We initially, when we had sent the plans in, I guess the timeline and cadence of this is we sent in a plan, and our plan actually did include a portion that required or necessitated a variance to the Garrett Park ordinance. But then it was brought to our attention that the plans didn't necessarily conform. So we were able to have a conversation with George Martin, who gave us a lot more information regarding the ordinance.
Right. And we tried to accommodate that with a separate set of plans, but we really feel that the variance would make a lot of sense for our structure.
Especially after speaking to Mr. George Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is Dan. I'm excited to support it and help the homeowners move forward. And from all the information that was provided to me, it was pretty clear that it deserves it and they should move forward. So I didn't know, Stephen, obviously, with your expertise, like, are we ready for a motion, or I'd be happy to make one or support one. I obviously don't want to squish any discussion, but I thought we provided a ton of information ahead of time to be able to study this. So I'm in support of moving forward.
Thanks, Dan. This is Mario. I agree. I think that I like the plan. Stephen did a lot of work on that. I read all the work, did all the paperwork, all the neighbors, all the support, all the letters in support of the work, which is really important to me because we went through the same process, guys. So I feel you. So I'm ready to move forward if for this, for my position.
Okay, did I hear a second or a first motion?
Oh, this is Phil. I'll second it.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Let's go. Phil is aye, Mario's aye, Jerry Lee,
Aye.
and I heard Stephen and Dan. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. And Sean and Jessica, you're good.
Thank you
Thank you very much, council members
and Mayor Kaki. We really.
Oh, just once. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll follow you. So,
We were
ahead,
saying thank you.
Thank you.
And very nice to meet everyone virtually. We can't wait to meet everyone in person.
okay. And this is Stephen again. The one last thing I forgot to mention before, there were some kind of architectural suggestions. We don't have an architectural review board here, so it wouldn't be requirements, but there were pretty strong recommendations and a couple things with the roof line and maybe how the side could be treated that we'll put together and kind of get to you, Sean and Jess, for your consideration. We'll put that in the report.
Yeah, glad to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you much, council member.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, great. 8:17, we're moving on to new business. And Jerry Lee and Morrow, you want to take on the first item about the potential statement regarding fair treatment?
Sure, this is Jerry Lee. So I think we've seen a lot of interest in town to take some sort of action related to the concerns that everybody has, or a lot of people have, about the racial issues of racial profiling. I think there's a lot of interest in making sure that Garrett Park demonstrates that we are a welcoming community, inclusive, and that we will not tolerate any kind of racial discrimination here in Garrett Park. So Mario and I had a very brief conversation. We didn't want to go into it in depth tonight because it was a last minute item that we're adding, but we were thinking it might be a good idea to maybe put together a committee that could perhaps partner with the Citizens Association. And now hearing the proposal for public art in this vein, that's another possibility. And the public art involves public property, so that's definitely something that we can't entirely delegate to the Citizens Association, but there is also the Penn Art Committee as well that could be involved. So we just wanted to have a brief discussion about what we could do as a council to support this movement and make it known that Garrett Park is a inclusive, welcoming community. Mario, do you want to add to that?
No, thanks, Shirley. I just want to say that, we want to make it clear to the citizens of our town that this is not falling on deaf ears, that we are definitely eager to make a position to maybe hopefully let some town members in some way, shape, or form, to your point, Jenna, do something. This is all happening, as we can tell, it's all happening at rapid speed. So we definitely want to move quickly on something. We just want to make sure we do our due diligence and do it quickly. And yes, we'll get back to with some ideas and maybe include some town folk on some suggestions moving forward. And we'll get on this right away.
This is Phil. I just wanted to make a suggestion. I appreciate Atticus wanting to do some artwork. I would like to suggest that we put up some type of signboard or something, because if it's done in the parking lot, well, it's great. People will be parking over it, walking over it, and eventually destroying it. Whereas if we put it up on something vertical like a signboard, then at least it would be around for hopefully quite a while.
I mean, I see Phil's point, but maybe just an alternate possibility might be that maybe it's a good thing. It would be kind of like, I think it's 16th Street that was painted. That's going to be somewhat temporary kind of environmental art that'll eventually be paved over. It could be the same thing here, that even if it wears out, it'll probably be well documented by photographers in town. That would be really, I think, a valuable thing to have in the archives to really remember this moment in time and the energy behind everything everybody's talking about this time.
Yeah, I agree. We have to just be sensitive to tone and not to offend those who may not take the same position that some others are, and we have to respect that, whether we agree or disagree with that. So there's a lot of things to take consideration. I definitely think we should do something. Maybe we can do something like where, remember 20 years ago where they had in New York City and other cities had all those like artistic cows placed all over the city, and maybe we can do like that, or what is different to get more people involved. I think this is great. He can spearhead it. Anyway, we can come up with a solution. I love the idea. We just have to be really sensitive to how and what is the right way to convey that message. And keep it local. Keep it about Garrett Park. It's not the whole overlay for national and federal. This is about our town.
Right. Yeah. This is Jerry Lee. I agree, Mario. We definitely want to focus on what we Garrett Park can do to promote inclusiveness in Garrett Park and ensure that people feel safe here. I think the public art discussion is a great one to move forward on. I realize now that we should definitely check, is there interest of the council to set up a side work committee to put together a council statement on this as well? Or would you rather focus on the public art exclusively? Checking for a sense of the council here before the work committee starts. I'm sorry?
This is Phil again. I'm all for the art, and it'd be something, again, I just bring up the putting on the street like that only because I would hate to think that the artist is offended if somebody parks on top of their artwork, but just trying to be sensitive to that. But I think the artwork would be a great idea.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can? Okay. So this is Jenna again. This is Jenna again, Atticus's mom. So the only thing I want to say about the alternate suggestions, and I have no problem with what you guys end up deciding, but I will let you know that putting it over where the graffiti was is part of the point, I think, in terms of how Atticus thinks about this. I'm just letting you know that. I don't think that there would be any problem having a longer term installation, but just like you mentioned, we went down to Federal Plaza yesterday, and just like you guys mentioned, yeah, it will fade, but it will be well documented as well. So, I mean, I'm just putting that in there because I'm pretty sure that part of why it really struck Atticus is because it was there and it was on the ground, and he wants to cover it up with something much more beautiful to kind of remove it, if that makes sense. So that's all I'm going to say, but I'm sure we'll go with whatever you guys decide.
And this is Phil again. Yes, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I think it's great.
I think Phil mentioned before, other artists may be inspired and want to join in. So it could be the kind of thing that might be great to really just get all that documented, all that, all the energy to kind of flow together.
And Jerry Lee, to answer your question, that might be the way to go, because it could be multi-generational. It could be inclusive of so many different residents, and just basically why the town council, what we can do is support it by either allowing land use or that might be the way we can approach it, Jerry Lee. We can talk more about this. I don't want to suck up the whole meeting on this conversation, but it's super important, and I agree, and I think I'm glad there's a lot of interest in it.
I'd like to say something there. I mentioned before about Susie Gifford and and Vicki Bailey, both of them, manage the Penn Place Art Gallery. And I talked with Susie just briefly about it, and she was open to this. So open in terms of doing something sort of on the same level that you were just speaking to, Mario, about different age groups and stuff. So by all means, consider keeping them in the loop as well, or bringing them into your discussion. They may have some ideas. I'm also going to throw another thing out that another resident brought to me was, and this might be much more, I don't want to say far-fetching, but it, in some ways, literally it may be, that the idea of adopting, a city or a neighborhood where there's, underrepresentation or just neighborhoods that are really struggling. And so that's something just to be thinking about. There was a resident who mentioned that. I can get her in touch with you all too as well. They're just beyond art, so there's other things to consider. And then Jerry Lee, you brought forward again the idea of the public statement. So I'd like to just sort of wrap up and go back and have that question raised. And how does council feel about that, a public statement, such as like a proclamation or a resolution or something? I think that's where we're heading here.
This is Dan. I totally support it. I guess what I would ask is, does it accomplish whatever the actual goal is? I'm personally a fan of not staying silent when something is important. So I think the communication is good. I do wonder, and I'm happy to work with Jerry Lee and Mario, if we should put our money where our mouth is. Like, an action accompanied by if we want to make a statement, maybe we should make an action, and the action is indeed a statement, if that makes sense. There's so much need out there, and I think that a town like ours could do something that at least sends a message, and we feel good about it, and we're on the record, and maybe we take an action that's a role model. So anyways, I think it would be easy to sort of debate this if we wanted to, because are we going to make a statement about every issue that's important? So I'm not on the counter argument side of this. I get hit with this shit in my public life all the time, with people telling me about all these other issues that they're annoyed I'm not advocating on. So I like this, and I think it's good for the town. I just wonder, if we could add an actual action to it. So that's my 2 cents, but overall, it clearly has my support.
Okay. So I still think, and some of you were on the council a year ago in January when we did issue the proclamation to support the National Day of Racial Healing.
Can someone mute their phone, whoever's making that noise? Sorry, Khaki, somebody was just chomping or something.
That's okay. I think it's a valid question, and I don't want to be, driving anything here, but I certainly appreciate this discussion, and I do think that, in my view, that the town putting something forward for the record, that we may issue some kind of a proclamation in support of this, or a public statement. I'm agreeing with Jerry Lee and Mario. I think there should be something, and in addition, some kind of action behind that statement. So why don't we just say, and don't let me put words in anybody's mouth. This is really Mario and Jerry Lee. You're the ones that are leading this effort right now. As we end this meeting tonight, what are we walking away with? Can you wrap that up for us?
This is Jerry Lee. I would propose that we agree to have a small work group work on this later this week to come up with the specific actions we want to take. And I mean, I think we need to figure out how we want to support the public art, as well as whether we want a public statement from the council and the mayor, and whether we want to also take another action such as Dan suggested, or anything else that might get proposed. And we could invite, make it a public meeting so that additional folks could weigh in if they would like to. I do think if we're going to support the public art, we'll have to come up with some sort of process, either having the Penn Place Art Committee approve a preliminary design or something like that, so that we can address the tone issue that Mario raised. So I would just propose that we agree to set up a committee meeting in the next few days to work out the specifics. Mario?
Yes, I second that. We didn't anticipate to have a resolution on this call today. Just this happened in the last 24 hours. So, in terms of discussing it internally here. So, so I think the action item is that we're going to regroup. We can bring inclusive maybe some recommended people as well, and let's come up with a game plan and decide. And it might be multi-step, right? It's going to be if there's a statement, we have to think about that. It's tricky, and then Dan's point and Jerry's point, again, a statement without action is just a statement. So we got to decide really what makes sense. And we want to do something. And I know that's kind of vague, and just the action item is let's push forward on this and come up with something the next 72 hours.
Okay. And maybe using GPML or something to notify residents. And you're also going to be working, I guess, with the Citizens Association. Is that
correct? That's another thing. Exactly.
Also with Susie and Vicky, perhaps. Okay. Was there somebody else who wanted to say something? I thought I saw a hand. No. Okay. I'm getting a message here. Elizabeth, I think you're muted. Are you able to speak? Andrea,
Elizabeth, do you want me to unmute you?
Yes.
I just unmuted you.
Oh,
okay.
Well.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Oh, hello, everyone. As everyone was speaking, I wanted to say that that's something that I would like to be involved with. And also that I just wanted to throw out a suggestion for people to think about, not to talk about now. It's just that in 1982, when we were declared a nuclear-free zone, I wonder if we might consider having a sign at both ends of town that would say something like a discrimination-free zone. It doesn't have to be that wording exactly, but something along those lines. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm glad we unmuted you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, but anyway, I would like to let Mario and Jerry Lee know that I would very much like to be involved in whatever discussions you're having and so forth. So
Thank you, Elizabeth.
It would be awesome if we were a racist-free zone, and then we actually wouldn't even let the racists drive through the town.
Yes, right. We'd have to somehow give them a test before they could pass.
They'd have to declare their intentions.
Right, up the hill, right. Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you, Jerry Lee and Mario. Let's see. Okay, so we're a little behind, so I'm going to try to be quick on a couple of the updates we also have under new business. So the next item is future sidewalks.
Jackie, can I interrupt you for just a second? This is Jenna again.
Sure.
I have to go,
Okay.
and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for your time tonight. And I look forward to hearing back from you guys.
You're welcome.
Thank y'all. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, Jen.
Right,
Bye.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Future sidewalks and curbs. So what the point of this item is really to get a couple things from the council without getting into detail. The detail can come later, as in perhaps the July town council meeting. Why it's relevant right now, though, is the timing. As we get closer now to Kenilworth, the question before the council is whether you want to commit having an extended sidewalk on Kenilworth down to the sledding hill. The reason it's relevant now is that the current design in the proposed sidewalk limits our ability to get it there without making a lot of different jigs and jags and jogs. And that's, having had this discussion with Stephen and Jason a few months ago, and Stephen had a concept sketch, we recognize that the current design would not fulfill us getting down to the sledding hill. For the council to give an indication of their commitment now would allow us to go to Jason and ask him to take a renewed look at the proposed current design just on that section of Kenilworth and how it would come down to the sledding hill, and possibly even integrating Stephen's concept sketch. This could also influence whether or not we have to have a change in the LOD, the total LOD permit, and also if this is more outside the current LOD areas, whether it would create the need for me to go to State Highway and get an actual change order. So it may not just be a simple infield adjustment, but an actual change order that would have to have a review by State Highway on the sketches. So the LOD is the limit of disturbance, by the way, and the town was granted the town was granted a permit for somewhere around 50,000 square yards of earth to be moved. So anyway, these are things that we have to kind of start preparing for now if this is where the council wants to go. That's one thing. So you have the question is the council committed to wanting to put in an extension for Kenilworth? The second thing for the council to consider is the priority, whether it would become Waverly, fixing the old sidewalks on Waverly and on Oxford, and doing that first or later. And that sort of also ties into the question of whether you would expect to see curbs on the last part of Oxford and what kind of curbs. Stephen and I talked about asphalt or concrete. It's Oxford's last section between Kenilworth and Montrose has about half a length of street in asphalt curbing, and then it has nothing. We know that on Waverly, from Montrose up to the Triangle, it has asphalt curbing. Do you want to be changing any of that out? Do you want to make it concrete or leave that one as is? These are things to consider as we go forward to ask Jason to do some sketching. And depending on the timing of that, if you want those done first before you do the extension. So all of this is sort of relevant. We just want to kind of get an idea from all of you tonight where you might be wanting to go with this. And lastly, well, actually, I'm going into the repaving timeline, which is more Andrea is going to speak to, and then we have the managers, project manager. They're all sort of related. So if you'd like to have a little of discussion on what I just started, and we might end up enveloping the same, the other items of repaving, as well as construction project manager, we can do that. But I'm going to kind of open it right now to the council, just to start getting their impressions, get your impressions on the sidewalk stuff. Is there even a commitment to go forward with an extension of the Kenilworth?
Stephen, maybe I can go first because I might be able to just add one or two things to it. I'm not understanding how they would be a priority other than just for funding. Like if we don't have enough funding to do all three, I think there was, it was before Mario, your time on council, but I think there was general support amongst council and mayor to kind of to look at all three of these. But one of the big questions was whether there's enough funding now to do all three, or if one would have to be deferred or two would have to be deferred of those. So I guess prioritizing all those is sort of one question. The details about the curbs, I think that's like a bigger discussion than we could ever accomplish today. And it's not just like plainly on preference, but there's engineering factors to it and there's cost factors to it. So it would probably be tackled more down the road, like once any are committed to. And then just to clarify on Kenilworth, the big issue is like the Kenilworth, you probably all heard, like it's the sidewalk to nowhere. The reason why it's the sidewalk to nowhere, that pejorative term, is because of vagaries in the way the town streetscapes were shaped and all the right-of-ways were shaped. So there's a pinch point there because Kenilworth used to have more jogs in it than it does now. It kind of got flattened out over time. So because of that, there's a pinch point right where that sidewalk would have to proceed. I had a way that I think it could work, and the engineer thinks it could work. So that's what Kaki's getting at, is like we have the potential to be able to do that, but to be able to set the table for that, whether it's done later, like slightly later, or if it's considered to do it now, the end of the tail end of the SRTS project has to change like slightly. It goes up that hill on Kenilworth. There's a speed bump, and as it descends the hill past the speed bump, the sidewalk kind of veers away from the center of the road towards the edge a little bit more, and Kenilworth just gets a little bit wider at there than it is at the speed bump. So we'd had to change that to make it more consistent and following that center line of the road all the way up to where SRTS stops. So that way it could kind of continue right past there, and it would just go 3 lots, so roughly 150 feet beyond where it is, and that would put you past where the Argyle and Kenilworth intersection is. So anybody that's a pedestrian coming from lower Kenilworth, like beyond Argyle, or coming up Argyle, will be able to kind of get onto the sidewalk outside of where cars would be turning on the Kenilworth from Argyle, kind of where that big house is on the corner. If that helps with some, just a little explanation of what this is about.
Stars house.
Yeah, the big Victorian there in the corner.
Yeah, and Stephen's idea of having a terminus right at the top of the hill, if you follow the sidewalk to its conclusion at the top of Argyle, which would still be on the west side of Kenilworth, and to actually create a terminus where you might have a town bench and potted flowers and stuff, just as a respite as well as a terminus. It clearly would show a terminus. Phil, did you want to add anything?
Well, I think one thing that we haven't really spoken a lot about is that as part of Stephen's sketch was doing some realignment with the sidewalk, such that the sidewalk would actually come more towards the street and actually end up kind of in the street in order to make this really happen. So there would be some changes to this. And in addition, in order to really make the best use of our money, we would want to do these changes up front with the SRTS money, so that when the time came and we wanted to fund the extension to the end, to meet up with Argyle, that we wouldn't have to spend a lot of money ripping up stuff we had already done.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the idea, is kind of just make the adjustments on the plan on how SRTS terminates, so that it doesn't make that obstacle to extending it, whether it's 2 months later or 2 years or 2 centuries later. So I'd rather see 2 months, because I'd like to get it safely to Argyle, but that's my take on it.
one of the things to consider, and this is getting into the weeds, which we don't, it's something to think about, but it would be something that Jason could help us with, and I would have to talk with State Highway about, is that when we say it's a sidewalk to nowhere, it's because there would have to be a sidewalk ramp, not a driveway ramp to be used as an on-off ramp to the sidewalk, but it would have to right now, where it's designed, to have a separate sidewalk ramp. That's the ramp to nowhere. That's the sidewalk to nowhere. So it would be, you know, on my part to really try to get State Highway to let us kind of keep continuing without creating this ramp to nowhere. If we can use a driveway for the time being, especially if we can do this quicker. I mean, if it takes, you know, a couple years, or like Stephen said, another 20 or a century, yeah, we're going to end up with some kind of a sidewalk to nowhere, with a ramp to nowhere.
The idea, the terminus idea, was kind of have something happen at that, at where that ramp would eventually go. It might be like a meeting spot or so on and so forth. Yeah. So not
no,
required,
Steve,
just a thought. Yeah.
I'm talking about the sidewalk ramp of the current proposed sidewalk right now.
I know.
We're not allowed to really end it into a driveway, because the driveway is not allowed to be used as an on-off ramp. So we would have to be creating, you know, a ramp from the sidewalk to the street, to the road, up by the speed bump or down by, you know, the two, I call them the painted ladies, somewhere in there. My desire would be to go back, and I'd try to talk to State Highway and say, can you let us just tie into a driveway, since we're still looking to extend the sidewalk down to our, that would be kind of where I'd come from with an argument, State Highway.
That'd be
Otherwise,
great.
if it is 20
Is
years or a century,
is there precedent for that, Khaki? Do we know, Stephen or anyone? Do we know, is there precedent for that? Would they grant that temporary because exception to allowing it?
They may, and I can tell you the history on this, Mario, very quickly. Originally, over on Oxford, we had some other, what we called ADA ramps, and then State Highway told Clark Azar to take them out of the design. So they were lifted out of the design. Interestingly, they remained in one of the general note detail pages. Anyway, as we were building the sidewalk on Oxford, District 3 was like, oh my God, you can't have a sidewalk end, just end. And I said, well, I think the intention here is to use this driveway or the other driveway, you know, there were two different points, as the on-off ramp. And they said, no, you can't do that. We don't approve that. You have to have its own, a sidewalk has to have its own ramp. So we went back to State Highway, and they were up. And that's how we ended up with a couple new ramps. So I'd like to think that I can get State Highway to go back and say, to let us do this, if they knew that it was going to be done very soon. I don't know, Mario, what the chances are, but I want to try. Because I don't want a sidewalk to nowhere for a century hanging out there with just a ramp from a sidewalk up at the middle of the kennel going into the street. We don't want that. I don't want that as my legacy.
So forgive me, because I know this has been going on for, you know, a long time, and I'm more or less to the weeds this in the last, you know, 6 weeks. Is this basically would be paid for by the state grant for the most part, correct? Or is this
not the extended? Not the extended, and
the extended would be
Stephen mentioned. Right, Stephen mentioned that that's about 150 linear feet, give or take, and that would be with town funds. So we're still, it's a two-part kind of question.
Yeah.
Because to get that extension done, we have to modify the current design that's leading up to where that extension would be, and that's in the SOTS, and that would be funded by the state. And that's why I'm not, you know, I got to make sure that there's not going to have to be a change order, or if there is, we got to start it now. You know, there's things like that, and a new permit if we have to, you know, get buy-in from the county and the state on the stormwater and the general construction.
Kathy,
permit,
this is
so-
Shirley. Do we have any kind of rough order of magnitude, or do we have to have the engineers do some work first to know that? For the cost, for the budget?
Sorry.
'Cause I don't know how we could approve it unless we have our budget.
I don't at this point, but we could get Jason to do something. And Stephen, would you like to speak to that, or Phil?
Yeah, I could. And that was something you and I discussed a little bit, Kaki. I think might be something they could put to a real quick, like sort of a letter study that would say, you know, here's parts A, B, and C, and maybe a little table of some options. So if it has, you know, the sidewalk itself has one cost, maybe a concrete curb has the second cost, and not doing a concrete curb or doing an asphalt curb might be like a third cost. That way, as more information kind of comes in on, you know, what's absolutely required by engineering and what's preferred by town and town council, those kind of menu of options could be chosen from to figure out what it costs. But it should be a lot cheaper than the SRTS project, because it's just, you know, straight up. And Kaki was already looking into ways to make it simpler as far as managing it. So I guess that kind of goes into a later topic, but.
For me, at least, I think that the important point here is that we decide if we really want to extend it, because if we want to extend it, then we can tell the engineer, okay, we want to extend it, and then they can give us not only a redo for the part of the SRTS, but they can also then propose what would be done to extend it to its terminus somewhere around Argyle. And I think that the big thing right now would be, do we want to extend it? Which I would think we would, but I mean, I'd be in favor of extending it, and then that we just go forward with Jason with that.
I think that's one of the things you were looking for, right, Kaki, is to see if everybody supports or doesn't, and then if any priorities.
And then we get going on that. Yeah. So how does the rest of the council feel? Are you unsure? Do you need more discussion about it, or you want us to kind of go forward with Clark Azar to get some, as Stephen says, you know, some just, you know, letter estimates and maybe just the conceptual sketches? We don't have to go into the full, you know, CAD kind of drawings, and just see if we have anything by July's meeting, maybe, or, you know, I mean, or do you want to just still have some more discussion on this before we go ask Jason to do anything?
This is Shirley. I'm fine with asking the engineers to give us some rough options with rough budgets, so that we could make a decision based on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Shirley. This is Mario. I think that's the prudent approach. I think I'm aligned with extending it, but let's just do a little more work in the next. As long as there's nothing's going to change between now and the July meeting, and we can get some additional intel from a third party, that would be super helpful.
Okay. All right. We'll go do that. We'll also ask Jason to give us some ROMs, rough order of magnitude estimates for Oxford and Waverly as well, and sort of somewhat in a la carte method, as Stephen described. You know, whether it's curbs or what kind of curbs, or no curbs, and that stuff. Okay. All right. So we'll get started on that, and hope to have something for you guys in July. There may be something more come out after I give you an update on the SRTS. But now the next question kind of ties into this, and actually these three items, where the sidewalk, the repaving, and the construction project manager all are related in terms of timing. Andrea, would you like to talk about the repaving? Are you there?
Yeah, sure. So during the FY21 budget discussions, we talked about how, with the uncertainty with the economy, that, you know, if there was any kind of large ticket items, that we would talk about them before moving forward with them. So this is in that vein. So in our FY21 budget, we have the best estimate that we can go off right now. Capital budget line item is that it'd be $153,000 to repave Oxford. So I wanted to have you all weigh in on timing, and if we want to have Jason relook at that estimate and also start to move forward with, this would possibly be the next step, step 2, but then having Jason move forward with putting out some sort of RFP and seeing what we get back, or if we want to kind of sit on that for a little bit. I think there's a lot of, from what I've heard, there's some desire from residents to have that done, but trying to balance that with the economy and with you all wanting to weigh in on that. So just wanted to bring that to you all before moving forward with anything.
I was curious about the 153. Is that for doing all of Oxford, or it seems like a lot for? I thought only the last block was due, the Weymouth block. I would think that would cost a lot less than 150 compared to other sidewalk projects we've done more recently.
I think that would be part of having Jason on a work order. Would be having him assess the condition of the road there and what parts of Oxford does he recommend having redone. What I'm going off is from FY16, and then it has a multiplier
okay.
that's used to get to the estimate. And I don't know how Jason would be looking at that now. And Khaki and I, when we talked about it before having him start a work order, we wanted to bring this to you all to see kind of where we're at in terms of timing with this and what you all are thinking.
Okay. I think Oxford was repaved several years ago, except for that last block. That's why I'm bringing that up. So it probably be just good to verify whether or not I'm crazy on that memory.
Also remember, Stephen, with the SRTS sidewalks going in, we have that slot now that borders along the gutter pan. Whether that, is something that, that would definitely be covered up as you mill the road. And so that goes all the way up to, the perpendicular of Montrose, following Oxford from Weymouth all the way up to the perpendicular.
Yeah, certainly not ideal, but we're going to have that on Claremont and Montrose and Kenilworth as well. So that's a long way.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but I'm relatively sure all but that one block was done within the last several years, but not totally sure. I think that last block was postponed specifically because the sidewalk was coming. So why do it and then tear it up? So, yeah.
Right. That's right. We've heard a lot of that from the residents living there, and they've been asking. We know it wasn't going to get done until the sidewalks were done. So now that the sidewalks are done, are you going to get this done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could sort of amend this then in my thinking to asking Jason to, take a look at maybe all of Oxford, but understanding that what we're really probably talking about is that last block, and then giving us an updated estimate and coming back to you all.
Okay. And he may have some other tips on kind of blending in that strip throughout the whole project too. So maybe just that broad question might open that up for him. So.
This is Jerry Lee. Can I just ask, I'm not quite following why the blending out of that strip wouldn't have been part of the SRTS project contract. Wouldn't that be something that we would expect the SRTS contractor to do, to smooth out the new sidewalk curb with the existing roadway?
I think you have to go back and ask the originators of the SRTS design. It was never in the design to have the road repaved.
Well, I'm not
That's
suggesting
a whole different cost.
And part of it might be me just misunderstanding what you're describing because it's hard to visualize. But aren't they obligated to put it back at least into a smooth state and not leave a gap?
So right, Jerry Lee, they do fill the slot. They first fill it with GAB, then they fill it with slop, concrete slurry slop, and then they fill it with asphalt. And that's what's been already done on Oxford. So they've done that part. That was their job to do. We're talking about the whole rest of the street. And if you've been up on Oxford between Weymouth and Keswick, you can see how pretty it's really in bad shape. talked to, and Dr. Martinez and Ken and so forth. So it's surface.
I understand that. I just wanted to make sure it was a little I was misunderstanding, I think, what was being said about how the streets would be left on all the streets in terms of that gap. I appreciate you clarifying.
Yeah, that's the lot, and that's just about the asphalt line. Will be there until it's paved over and blended in with the rest of the asphalt surface of the road.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of Andrea going ahead and getting that updated estimate from Jason.
Everybody else okay with that?
Sounds good to
Everybody
me.
say no. So
Yeah.
sounds like everybody's in favor.
That's fine, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think you just
Angela?
need the components, like what it is for the Weymouth block, and then separate what it would be to go further.
Do the whole thing.
So.
Yeah, and he'll assess, like Andrea said. We'll ask him to assess the condition, road condition in general, the different segments.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
So, and that, Andrea, I think we're also, not sure whether this could even be done. We're in June. We only have a month until the fiscal year ends. So there's no way we're going to be using this current fiscal year money anyway, right?
Right, it's in capital.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
right.
in capital.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
List of
So
additions.
we already got it there.
Yep.
Right. Okay, let's go to the last one, which is the construction project manager. You might recall that during the budget retreat, we talked briefly about this, and there were some council members who kind of advocated that, maybe it's time we get a project manager, and not necessarily on staff on payroll, but for the ad hoc different projects that we have. And we can talk about why George Miller it won't work right now, and Andrea can fill you in on this. But why we're bringing this up is because of the issues that have been going on with the Safe Routes to School project and the daily amount of time that I'm giving, and that I am finding almost every day a mistake. And I've talked with several council members about this, even recently. And like today, there was another mistake. And when I look around, I'm the only woman. There's like 7 guys standing there, and I say, guys, it shouldn't be me that's finding these mistakes. And I'm really getting tired of it. And you all probably know that. I am just tired of it. I'm frustrated and so forth. To get a construction project manager who could come in, be the eyes and ears, managing it daily, they can always report back to me and report back to you all on what's going on. And then if the person is living up to the expectations that the town has, that person could also step in and do the Waverly, Oxford, and Kenilworth extension sidewalks, because I can, as you all know, I'm not going to be doing that. So it's more a question now of whether you would actually concede to allowing us to hire somebody on a temporary contract to do this, or if not, even with at least sidewalks that are in the near future to do.
Jackie, what's the role of the inspection contract that we pay for? Is it not
I'm sorry, what?
things like this, or are they looking at a more narrow scope of inspection?
Right. Boy, I wish I could. I wish I could be 100% certain, Jerry Lee, because I have thought that this is their job, and I have talked over and over about with the inspection agent that I shouldn't be finding these mistakes, and these are mistakes that they should find. Let's go in order. The Patriot Superintendent, first of all, the subcontractor, they're responsible for getting it right. If they miss it, then the superintendent on site, which is the GC, which is under the GC, under Patriot, that person is then supposed to get it. If that person's missing it, then it's the field inspector who reports to the town. They're supposed to get it. And so when you get all three of those people missing it, and then I show up, and almost every day I'm finding the mistakes, or I've learned that they gave the wrong, made the wrong decision that only put us into another situation or circumstance where we had to redo something, which is what's been happening over on Shelley. And I found a mistake again today where the landing wasn't level. Nobody found it except me. It takes our time. It's exhausting to me, but fortunately it doesn't cost the town anything, but it puts more of a delay on the rest of the work. So I can't tell you for sure. I can tell you we've had a lot of trouble with the field inspector, Jerry Lee. I can also tell you, whoever's got the mute off, you need to put the mute on. But I can also tell you that as of today, we have a new person as a field inspector. We still have the same company, but they swapped out the current person with a new one. And I'm hopeful that that person's going to be better. I did explore this, Jerry Lee, with State Highway. You all may not, some of you won't know this because you weren't on the council, but we only had one bid for this field inspection service. And now to try to get a new one to replace, get a whole new company, State Highway says in order for them to continue to pay, to reimburse the town for this service, we have to go through State Highway rules and regs on their procurement process. And they said it would take 2 to 3 months. Sure, we don't want to do that. I've explored some other ways to do it. State Highway has still said no. So now I'm saying, well, maybe we keep them. And as of today, just learning that we've got this new person. And then if we could get a project manager, and just being transparent and forthright, you all know that Patriot, the general contractor, has gone through major house cleaning of its upper management as well as the level of project management and staff. One of the people that was let go is available. So that person who lives in Somerset knows very well what small government is like, knows very well what a historical town is like, has been working with us on this project, so they know the sensitivities of this town, and they also know the project. So that's one good thing if we wanted to jump on it.
Jackie, can you first of all, I hear what you're saying, and I can completely empathize with what you're going to have to deal with, like just constant, quite frankly, lack of professionalism and just sloppy work on the part of the people that work on behalf of our town. But question, you mentioned in the outset, on the onset rather, that George Martin is not available to be like a point of contact, project manager for this.
Miller.
I'm sorry, George Miller. Sorry, I meant George Miller. Sorry. Yeah. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Forgive me for not knowing this ahead of time. Again, I'm just trying to understand before we go explore something else. Just trying to see if there's something we can.
Well, I'm going to let Andrea speak to that, but let me give a quick 2 cents on this. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One currently is that, we haven't opened, right? We're not fully open. The office is still closed. The maintenance staff is still on a irregular kind of schedule with one person working at a time. Second thing is that, Frank has got some physical restrictions, limitations. So the hefty work is really up to just Butch and George Miller to get done. So then to speak to the whole schedule under COVID, I'll let Andrea do that. The second thing to think about here is even if we don't have anybody doing the project management now, I'm staying on this. I have to, don't want. But if we go forward with the other sidewalks, there are ways to look at that. You know, and none of us, nobody knows yet which way we want to go. And I explored this with Stephen and Phil. You'll hire a general contractor like a Patriot who comes in. Granted, we don't have to do as much of the bureaucratic stuff as the state highway has required us to do. But you still have to coordinate with utilities. I'm sure we're going to have tree work that we have to, you know, be on top of, and tree root protection. And then it's, you know, every company is their own different, you know, specialty. You've got your excavation, and then you've got your concrete, and you've got even asphalt. They're all different. So you're either left with getting a GC under an RFP like we have with SRTS to manage and coordinate all of that and all the different work schedules, right? Or you have a project manager under the town who then would oversee that. And I know that George would not be doing that. So now I leave it up to Andrea if you'd like to take a stab at it.
Yeah, just the only thing I would add is, you know, just the understanding of trade-offs too, right? So if George is doing this, then there's other things that aren't getting done. And I think we probably all went into the sidewalk project knowing it'd be a lot of work. I don't think that any of us anticipated the amount of challenges that we ran into. And again, you know, echoing what Kaki said, hopefully we wouldn't have some of those same challenges if there's less bureaucracy involved, but there would still be a lot of coordination and all of that involved. So it would just be a matter of if we're comfortable using George's time this way instead of another way, you know.
Okay, and yeah, so again, I'm not. I think it's the right idea to consider, and I mean no offense to this, a professional project manager to can take this home, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know the backstory behind this, so I don't know if this is something that was taken up by the board the council in the past, and just we didn't want to invest additional dollars because we already have staff. So I don't know the behind that, but it certainly makes sense to me to kind of maybe level set and get some person in here that can that's sort of independent, that can, you know, report to the mayor and council and just wrap this thing up and not be a massive time suck and for you, and also can push this forward, and then also set the precedent for the next big project that, you know, that'll be undertaken by our team at some point. So is the question, so Keki, is the question in terms of like, is it up for debate? Do we want to fund a construction project manager? Is that more or less what?
Yes, and whether you'd want to do it now to cover the SRTS, or yes, you're interested, but you only want to do it for the upcoming future sidewalk work.
This is Jerry Lee. So when we talked about the train whistle consultant, the discussion was, and this was already 2 months ago, that there wasn't enough time in the fiscal year to procure those services this year. So how would we be able to do this timing wise with the fiscal year end?
Well, I think it was different with the whistle consultant because we needed to have a lot more discussion on requirements and specs and deliverables. In this case, it's fairly standard with what we would expect a project manager to do for construction work projects. And we, as I mentioned, we do have somebody, and it's a small procurement. It's not considered large. You can do it with either a sole source in this case, and you might be familiar with the Joe Fox, the justification for other than full and open competition, because this person has firsthand knowledge, and you could make the case, or you can just go with 3 quotes off the GSA. So it can be done very quickly, especially because, you know, we already know what the requirements would be. They're pretty generic. And like I said, we have a person. So if we wanted to go with that person.
Is it, Kaki, is it prudent to go with a person that was working for a firm that we didn't like the way they worked? Or, it's just.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and I've actually talked with State Highway about it, and they asked the same thing. And I generally, that would be something I would be cautious about, absolutely. But in this particular case, the person was let go, and I don't think that the person has any loyalty now to do anything that actually benefits the other company. Yeah, I think he's got enough integrity that he wouldn't be jeopardizing any of that, and he certainly knows the project. And he knows what we're all about. That's all. It's not like he would absolutely be making decisions either. He's more the eyes, the ears, and saying, you guys got this wrong, and you got these, like I said, you got 3 other levels.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Section that should be seeing that, But I'm the one that keeps finding them, and I'm tired of it.
I found some too, but usually the benefit of having like a third-party project manager, usually come in more complex projects, but usually the big benefit is that they're completely impartial to the project. They don't really have any emotional tie to like what it is, so they don't have any hang-ups about just saying it like it is. Like, you contractor, you messed it up, you had to fix it, you're paying for it, and end of story sort of a thing. So I kind of, it sounds like this person would be independent because they would be, they've severed ties with that organization. But if there's any kind of like reluctance on their part to, be that completely, I don't care, this is just what it is, kind of attitude, then it may not fully benefit it as much as if it was like a stranger to the people working on the job.
Well, this is Phil. I think the rest of the SRTS would be a good spot to start, because we could at least evaluate this person as they go forward, and then that would help us with whether or not we want to continue with this person, or we want to try and find somebody else or do something else for some of the other projects. Because we've also got stormwater, don't forget, some other stuff. There could be some bigger projects.
Mm-hmm. Maybe some way to appease some of the concern that you have, Stephen, is rather than say that this person that we would commit to for this whole bulk of time, we could do it on like a month at a time basis. It's not working out. I think I would respectively disagree, though, with you about having a fully independent, because what I have been finding since day one is the investment of concern and, review of what's going on day to day. And I don't know why, because I'm not an engineer, but boy, do I see the things. And actually, Stephen, you even saw one, but not to go back onto that, but I'm telling you, even today, I mean, I just focus in and I just say, why are you doing that? Or go measure that. That doesn't look right. Or, no, that isn't right. That's not what the town wanted. And to have somebody who is already familiar with that type of sensitivity, I'm not sure if the person would, could fill my shoes, and not that my shoes are somebody, that are that big to be filled, but I come at it with a real concern and a real interest that they're doing things right. And maybe my expectations are even too high, but I can tell you, if I didn't catch these, we'd be living with a lot of things that look a lot different. So having somebody who's really already familiar with this and knows how, I approach it, and knows what the town feels about, their arboretum and the smooth curves and the undulating roads and so forth, and the sidewalks to match, that really makes a difference.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying to not. Not at all saying not to pay attention to it. I'm saying just in a more general sense, that's usually a big benefit of a third-party project manager, is they don't feel like it's it's theirs. I just feel like I'm here, I'm being objective. A lot of times their biggest value is they kind of tell some people what they don't want to hear. So sometimes at work, I'm on the side of that, you know, being told by a third party project manager, maybe it's something I don't want to really hear, but it's kind of valuable to kind of see it from that objective stance. That was all my point was. So.
So, Khaki, what would we need to go forward with this if we were going to agree to it? What are the next steps and what needs to be done?
I think with Andrea's help or with Stephen and Phil or anybody who would like to assist, I'd quickly get a procurement action written up for a statement of work. We don't have to do an RFP, just a statement of work, and then we could either, if you'd like to interview the guy, I'm sure he's available. He could probably come in this week or next week. I have to talk with Andrea about the estimated hourly rate. I think, what I know of right now, I think it's a little high, and I have to go back and see if we can make it lower. So we wouldn't do anything without getting further, quotes or something, and you're okay anyway. So, but right now, just like this week and next, we could get this thing written up for statement of work specs, and if you guys want to interview this person as our first pick, we certainly can do it. It would be on town money. It's not something State Highway would be paying for. And like I said, I certainly am very strongly confident we could make this a justification for, other than for an open competition. We could make it a sole source if we had to, even though it's kind of a nominal cost anyway.
Well, it's kind of outside the SRTS requirement, so probably shouldn't be an issue, just because it's kind of like the town's option to have its own advisor. So.
Yeah, but we do follow, the federal procurement regs and processes. True. That's why I mentioned the other things. Yeah. Specifically.
Yeah, we have our own town rule.
Do you have a rough order of magnitude of the cost you're looking at?
Well, I've got to drive down the hourly cost. I don't know if you all have any idea of what a project manager for construction could be. I was given, and please don't quote this in the paper or in the Bugle. Maybe I'll just play it safe that it was over 100 per hour, which I'd like to try to drop down.
I mean, this is Dan, if we were hiring a project manager or a construction manager or a quality assurance manager like this for a job, I'm sure we'd be paying on one of our construction sites, 125 or 130 bucks an hour for that skill. They're generally worth their weight in gold when they're managing enough money that you're getting burned on time and quality and money if you don't have someone at that skill level to manage it.
Yeah, that's not a bad estimate. I don't know what size projects you would be looking at. I don't know that our project is considered pretty small in terms of construction, which is part of the problem we've been having, and I'm happy to get into that when I get to the SRTS update, which we've got to get to very soon, to tell you what is changing with the SRTS. So we're actually a small project. I don't know about yours.
Can we backfill George with more support for what his day-to-day function is and free him up to do it? Would that also give us a skill set that's fluent with it, and maybe it could be easier to replace his day-to-day? Just a thought.
So, Dan, you mean hire landscapers, which are like you can hire for, and let George do that, whereas because he's already on the payroll, that might be a way to consider that. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I don't know exactly what George's day-to-day is, but that might be a place to bring in, the resource, and you let George, presuming he's got the skills and he's fluent to be the PM on the sidewalks.
I think there would be some challenges doing that in terms of our guys take a lot of pride in how things are done, and we've brought in some external parties to help out, kind of backfill when needed, but it's not always up to the standard of what what our guys would consider that it needs to be done. So just throwing that out there as a kind of caution.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is there's going to be risk when you hire a project manager you don't know. There's risk when you hire someone to do anything you don't know. There's risk. So do we want to take some risk on our, let's just say, our landscaping standards, or do we want to take some risk on the sidewalk project management? So duly noted, that there's probably some risk. So I might look at it that way.
Okay, so if I could add just something else, and I think it's a great idea, but I have to put the caveat out there, and especially Phil and Stephen, who've looked at these design drawings, ad nausea, that there is a lot of detail, a lot of notes, a lot of specs, and I don't know if that's where George, if that's his sandbox anymore, because you got to stay on top of them, you got to know them, you got to remember them, and if I tell you, if an inspector who's supposed to be, able to do this stuff doesn't do it, I'm just not sure about George, as well-intentioned as he might be, but to put it on a project manager, semi-independent or whatever, however we want to call him, this person we could hire as a contractor, that is his responsibility to know every single bit of what's in the plans. Because that's what I run into. Nobody's looking. Nobody's following them, or they forget, or they misread them, they misunderstood them. I mean, my God, it goes on and on.
Yeah, look, if it's not George's skill set, then I certainly don't want to endorse him. And I do agree, it takes a lot of detail. You got to know the contract. I think you also got to be able to collaborate with the lawyer. I think we got to know where the liquidated damages are. I think we got to drop the legal hammer and the project management hammer on Patriot's head hard. So I'm all in on hiring somebody, and I'm all in on hiring the right person. So you've got my support there. And I think Andrea and Mayor Kaki, y'all ought to find a candidate or two and tee them up, and let's not fucking debate it till the cows come home, because each day that goes by, Kaki, it just leaves you in the unfair position of trying to manage every single second of it. So I'm in support of getting somebody and getting someone in as quickly as we can.
How does everybody else feel? Is that okay?
I second that. I second that. I think you should go for it. I think we should move on. I agree. I also want to reiterate what Dan just said. I think there comes a point, and I think we're at the point, Kaki, where we are going to have to go after Patriot, and we will recoup some of this money that we might have to pay for a project manager, because let's leave it at that.
Okay. So you already know we lost. Maybe I should just go into the project update right now. Can I do that? The SRTS project update? Anybody mind if we move over to that?
Sounds a good idea.
Okay, let's segue into that. And I'll try to.
Are we going to still
try to keep it brief?
I understand. I just want to make sure I understand. So I'm in agreement with the project manager, but do we want to set like a ceiling or something for this contract?
It can't be open. Yeah.
But let's see what we get first, and then we take. Believe me, Andrea and I will not even sign anything until we've brought it to your attention. So if you want to talk about a ceiling, you mean by hourly rate, I guess, right? Because we already know, and that's part of my
total spend on the project.
We're looking at
really.
We're looking at another 60 work days at least, and I'm hoping that we don't go beyond that, and I'm going to talk to you about that in this update. So if the 60 times the 8 hours a day, you're looking at 480 hours, and times that by whatever your rate is. So you get your idea, okay? 480 hours.
Yeah, usually these kind of third-party project managers are nowhere near full-time, unless it's a really complex project. I pulled up a proposal for one. It's
Stephen, may I interject? Because I want to move on, but the contractors usually are on the job at 7. The superintendent hasn't been on the job at 7, but the contractors usually show up at 7.
I'm talking about
And they
the
don't
third-party
usually
project manager. I'm not talking about the GC
wait a minute.
and the contractors.
Wait a minute. They don't usually leave till 3 or 3:30. The project manager, if they're taking my place, they better be on that job because I'm up there and I'm going back and forth all the time. I'm up there at 10. Sometimes I'm up there at 9. Sometimes I'm up there later. But I could certainly spend a whole day. I do want a project manager on site because I don't have the confidence about being field inspector or the superintendent who is not changing as far as. So I do want to say, you know, at the high end, you're looking at 8 hours a day. Because I know the field inspector is there till at least 3 or 3:30. And what happens here, in fact, you may not realize all the stuff, but there's a lot of counting, you know, quantifying of material or linear feet. You know, all of that is done every single day. And that's why, you know, people, you know, field inspector stays on. George has come out sometimes to help validate the numbers. He's not there every day. So that's why I would say at least at the upper end, I'd say 8 hours.
And let me ask you, which bucket do you intend to pull this from? Will it be a capital or is it going to be in operations?
What do you think, Andrea? Andrea, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Do we have anything under professional or consulting fees?
Yeah, probably. I think it could go either way. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Under the capital, there's that capital planning, but I don't know that this really falls under that. So I think that would probably put it under operations.
But we can revisit that, you know, because we can move money from contingency and so forth. So, I mean, unless, Phil, there's another reason you're asking? Or is that what
No, I was
was it
trying to
Phil who
figure.
asked the question?
No, I just wanted to put it out there, something we'll need to figure out at some point. And I mean, I would probably lean towards capital only because it's basically for a capital project, but other people may have better ideas.
Okay, we'll make a note.
So what's the limit for the small purchase? Because that's like $48,000 you're talking about.
There's 60.
Depends on the hourly rate.
Yeah.
What was
Right.
the question, Jerry?
Well, I was just wondering what the procurement, you referenced like a purchase limit, small purchase limit.
Well, you know, there's the micro purchase, which I think under, it might be under COVID or it's under the Defense Act right now. The micro purchase goes up to 30,000. Then there's the simplified acquisition process, which only requires minimum of 3 quotes, GSA, and that SAP, we call it, the simplified acquisition procurement is, I think it goes up to, I think it goes up to 250 now. It just got raised. It's either 175 or 250. Anyway, we're well under that. But anyway, that's why, you know, we could get this going pretty quickly. Does that help you?
I say let's get the details. I think I know where Jerry's going with this. It can't just be an open checkbook. So let's just get the details. Let's get the rates. Let's figure it out, and then we can come back and decide if it makes sense to go forward or not.
Agreed.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. We will kind of get that going in this week, and maybe Stephen, Phil, if you're available, we can run the specs by you.
Certainly, just send them.
Statement of work.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll get that far going. Okay, SRTS update. So a few things to note. We do now have a new excavating company. They were on the job today, reviewing past mistakes of the former excavating company and trying to find out more information about where they go starting this week with excavation, and that is all about what the stakeout measures actually mean. I'm not going to get into that, but that's been part of the discussion. We had Jason Azar back on the phone, and I'm going to get him involved again. Anyway, they seem very good, well experienced so far. I'm pleased with what I've seen and what I've heard. And, you know, they speak English, which is different, which is great. So the communication problems are less challenging. Same thing with, I alluded to already, Hyatt Brown, the field inspector. I've been notified today that they have changed out their person, who I now have met the new person, and his language skills are much better. And I'm hopeful that's going to be a little easier for communication. RNS, the concrete, they finished the sidewalk ramps over on Shelley and Oxford, even though we had to fix a few things. But that finally got poured, so I'm hopeful that that's done. The next thing will be some topsoil. There's a question about some sediment and erosion control issues we're looking at right now, whether we don't think we can do it with sod, but there may be another means of material that we can use, like brick or stone or something. So that's more in the weeds than I wanted to get. I just want you to know it's almost done, not quite. You all have been making mention of putting the hammer down or the stinger, and you may all not know, but I had held off paying the April invoice because I wanted to get Oxford done, and they didn't like it, but I had done that. And that's somewhere around, $100,000 or something. So, if that doesn't sting, I don't know what does. They are aware of back up a second. You all know about the management upheaval that's happened. So new people on the job, they're trying to get acquainted with how we work, and I'm finding some other questionable things that they should know that they don't know. Anyway, all that is to say that they also have had to resubmit a new time extension because we're past the old one that never changed. From day one, they were behind. Somebody asked me that. From day one, when they were awarded and given the notice to proceed, we had a 150 calendar day requirement. They thought it was 150 work day. State Highway allowed it. So when they put their manpower work schedule together, they were using 155 work days. And State Highway and District 3 had allowed it, but they had to follow through with a time extension just to let that be formalized. And that time extension, that timeline went up to June 5th. Well, we're past that now, and a month ago, they had to get another time extension put in, and it was just being worked on now as of like today and Friday, and I've already told Patriot that it's unacceptable because they wanted to go into mid-September, and I said there is no way we're going to do that, and I warned them again about the liquidation damages. This is where the one little thing I wanted, you all want the hammer down, but we lost one excavating company. Do you really want to lose Patriot? Because I sure as heck don't want to go through another procurement process. So I'm trying to find the middle line here, because, they've done things for us, like the ramp, field adjustments, things that have happened. And, we're trying to come out here with net zero, but I do hear you all, and we've got new management. And one of the things I learned is that the person in charge now is looking at the efficiencies, because I've complained for a long time about how some of these subs are not available, and then we have to wait. And that person has heard me, and he is building that into the schedule in advance to make sure that they are locked down with these subs to come in on that whatever given day. And so everything is, you know, hopefully going to be tied in, and they're going to be held. They're going to be held to that. Because they weren't doing this the last time. And I think I mentioned to you guys, I mean, this is a small job. And when we first went out to make the award and had the discussions with Patriot, one of the first things we asked about was, are you guys going to be able to start and finish in one, you know, fell swoop? You're going to go, you know, right on through and finish. And they assured us, yes. And what's happened over time, because everything got started so late, I'll get into that, but, you know, now all these subs are out there getting other jobs, more, you know, higher paying jobs, and, you know, they're fitting us in. And this was a concern we had even several years ago. So this is where we are, and this is what I've been talking with Patriot about for a couple months now. And with this new person, he's actually working this into the schedule. And then speaking of the schedule, I'm going to meet with Dan later this week to go over this timeline with him, and maybe even with Patriot in the room at the same time. So we have another set of eyes looking at that, because I've already warned Patriot that we're not going to go that far into September. We're not going to go into September at all. And then I got to look at the reasonableness of why, you know, what's happening in June, finishing up Claremont. What's happening in July, finishing up the outfall stabilization work in Porcupine Woods and finishing up Montrose. What's happening in August, finishing up Kenilworth. Now, I don't know if it really requires 1 month for each street section. So that's something I need to explore with them in more detail. I do know a lot of the work that has to take place, and it requires a lot of work, a lot of manpower, a lot of manual work. But having, you know, Dan and, you know, if Mario or somebody else, Stephen, Phil, if you want to look at the schedule with me too, that's fine. But I'm going to have to make a decision this week, you know, and either have them, you know, revise it. Already I know I'm going to revise it. So they're going to have to revise it before we submit it. That's where we are. Does that help?
Thank you, Jackie.
Any comment? Okay, that's all my updates.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you. Okay. Phil, do you think you could keep your topic really short? Because we're at 9:42.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it extremely short. So I sent to everybody, hopefully you guys got it, was a thing where Andrea and I and Cracky have been talking about possibility of black market wanting to put some additional outdoor dining in by taking up part of the street. And I just heard today, and Dan, you may be able to confirm this or not, that the Maryland governor said that phase 2 is not going to include having people sit down in restaurants. And so what we're trying to do is basically get ahead of things, that if black market comes by and says, yes, we want to do this, we'd like to extend our seating by asking you if we can take over part of the street. We want to bring it up to the council, discuss it, see if anybody has any ideas, objections, comments, or whatever. And so to that end, basically, I drew up some quick and dirty maps based on something that Andrea had already sent to me, just kind of giving an idea of what would happen, what it might look like. And so that's what I sent out today. And basically, in a nutshell, what it's going to be is blocking off part of Waverly so that when you come up towards the post office, you have to go down past Penn Place, around Penn Place, and then come back out the other side to get on the Rokeby, because the area in front of the in front of Black Market there, where the handicap space and the other space is would become seating, except next to it there would be a pedestrian walkway. On either end, there would be a couple of sturdy barriers to prevent cars from coming through. And there would be a delineated area where the seating would be. And we would have to do like a one-way, essentially a one-way street down Waverly. Rokeby would be, still be two-way, except you'd have to have a U-turn at the, you have to have a U-turn where the train station is, essentially, to turn people back, because you wouldn't be able to go back the other way to go up Waverly. And so in short, anybody who's going to the post office would have to go down Waverly, go to the post office, go around the back Penn Place, and then out on Rokeby. You couldn't just turn around and go back up Waverly like, for instance, I normally go. So this is just an idea to see what the council thinks, and if they would be amenable to doing something like this if Black Market requests it. Any questions?
Phil, just so I understand it, we haven't heard from Black Market yet. This was like a proactive move in case they are interested in doing it.
Well, Andrew's actually been the contact there, so I'm going to let her fill you in with that.
Yeah, I think Kaki and I both talked to Shauna about some different ideas and just brainstormed some different solutions there. And this was in anticipation of being able to have even the outdoor seating. So this, for me, this was a couple weeks ago. I think Kaki's may have been more recent. But I have not heard back from Barbara yet. So we haven't actually heard definitively that they want to do something, but I would like to sort of understand from council if how much I should be following up based on how much council is okay with that.
Got it. And then is that street, does the town own that street? That's not public, that's not like county owned, we own it?
Yes, within our jurisdiction.
Okay, I don't know. I didn't know how the streets work. So it's right to close.
I think there are some parking spaces that are within the right of way of CSX, but the roads would all be ours, as far as my understanding. Is that right, Kaki?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the parking to the right of the station is CSX. Everything else is town.
When obviously, you guys know I'm going to be pro restaurant, and I also think the restaurant is great for the town, and I think the activity is great. And since the restaurant is a tenant, it's hard for a tenant to pay rent when they don't have any revenue. Looking at the overhead picture you sent, there's also, if for some reason, if there's just too much objection to the change of the parking flow, which I don't really have an opinion about that. I don't think that's that big a deal, but I can understand some people might. There's a lot of sidewalk space there. Like, I'm just looking at the bird's eye, so they might be able to get quite a fair amount of tables on the sidewalk space, and then we just have to think about ADA access and other stuff. But my opinion is it's an interesting idea, and I'd be open to exploring it. It just has to be connected in with actual payment of rent. So I'm happy to help on that topic, but in general, I'm in support of the idea.
Interesting, Dan, if I might interject here, Andrea. So if they can't open up the restaurant to seating inside, am I hearing you right that you are suggesting that they would still have to pay the town extra for using some designated space out on the street or sidewalk or both?
Well, they're still responsible legally to pay their rent, whether they can open or not.
Sure.
So my point is, if we want them to be able to pay any rent, we should be trying to help them add tables.
Okay.
So that's
good. I thought I heard something different. Okay. I thought you said we would be charging them extra for the street side table sitting. Okay, good.
Yeah, and then I think if we were to do this, the way to do this is to tent that area so it's weather protected. I'm doing this at a restaurant line in Philadelphia, so I could send a photo. If I think your big question here is, do you have support for the parking, for the traffic pattern change? If you do, it's probably a really cool idea that would be a really nice dining environment for the town.
I think that's going to be up to you, council, for streets and roads and traffic. I mean, there certainly will still be ample parking out in the Penn Place parking.
We're not, right, and we're not taking away any parking spaces. All we're doing is we're just basically saying that Waverly is going to be. What?
I'm sorry, Phil, go ahead.
Oh, well, we're taking away 2 parking spots. We're going to have to move them slightly. But and for the most part, the only thing we're doing is we're making Waverly one way, and then we would have to make a turn back for Rokeby so that you could go back the other way. I don't see that as being a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. I think I'm looking at the map. I think it's doable. It's definitely doable. I mean, we're going to make certainly going to make the trip around Penn Place like a true traffic pattern, which is not ideal, but I think whatever you do to help the restaurant and help the town, and make it work.
Maybe it's worth just studying an alternate to see like if maybe the sidewalk and the grass area and the 2 parking spaces in front could be used kind of a springboard on what Dan was saying earlier. Maybe even instead of going around Penn Place, maybe you just still leave traffic wedged through outboard of that, still go down Waverly and turn left on to Rokeby, not have to go around Penn Place, but then that would maybe allow you to put more seating out over towards where the railroad crossing is. So maybe you just do a U-turn behind in front of the maintenance building instead of having to go all the way around the building. Does that make sense?
I can make a couple remarks to that, Stephen, because we sort of explored that even with Shauna. One is they don't really want to cross road or, kind of street access of traffic, so they want to keep it more, they want to keep their servers, close to the building. Number 2, and maybe Andrea, you might know more about this than I, but I think the latest thing I've been reading is that, and this is downtown DC, and so maybe Dan, you know as well, but it's all about keeping a safe distance away from cars. So you're kind of out in the middle there where you got you got those extra parking spaces, those 2 parallel ones. They really keep traffic away. So that's why the suggestion was to just kind of block off Waverly right there and let it go around Penn Place. So traffic is not coming around near the dining.
There's another element that was in, I'm thinking it was state guidance. Again, Dan, you probably know this better than I do, but something about kind of trying to keep your servers, giving them a path and giving your pedestrians a different path and giving your people eating a different space. So trying to not cross those streams as much as you can, just to make sure that everybody kind of has their distancing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the plan you have, I think this is solely a traffic flow question. This would work really well for the restaurant and work really well for the diner. So it's just if everybody can wrap their heads around the change of traffic flow and, is it somehow more dangerous or whatever? And I have no idea how many cars actually go in that pattern or if the neighbors that live down there would be annoyed, but it's good for the restaurant. It's good for the restaurant customer would be my take.
Yeah, this is Shirley. I don't necessarily have a problem with the concept of doing this. I do think that we need to look at that traffic flow and consider whether maybe full one instead of attempting 2-way there along the railway parking and along could make sense. And then there is some cost here, right, with the sturdy barriers, and are we going to bear that as a town, or are we asking the market to cover that cost?
I think it would depend on the nature of which type of barriers and if the town would have a way to reuse those for something else later, or if this is something the restaurant would be able to reuse for something else later. I think we'd have to see what those things are.
Yeah, there's also signage too. I forgot to mention that, sorry.
I mean, we could certainly look into what it would cost for some of the removable, say, concrete or water-filled ones. I know we use some water-filled ones at work where you can rent the things. And sturdy was just a word, meant it wasn't going to be just like a simple pole and a stanchion type thing. It was something that was a little more substantial, so somebody wouldn't want to hit it with their car.
It's probably a pretty easy investment for the town. I don't think it would be that much money. And I think from a pure math standpoint, like, it's hard, again, if we want the rent, like, the landlords are in this situation where the landlords may need to kind of help the restaurateur be able to operate, and then in return, the restaurateur is able to pay rent. So it's still financially, my hunch, a win for the town.
It's not unheard of for towns to do this even outside of COVID-19 too. Stephen, you're probably familiar with like parking day. So towns and cities will take parking spaces and convert them into temporary kind of fun areas. So sometimes that's seating, sometimes that's an art installation, sometimes that's something else. And this is something that cities and towns do to kind of encourage interesting planning and kind of rethinking, if you really need the amount of parking that you do, can you do something fun with that space instead? So it's not totally unheard of for a town or city to invest a small amount in something like this.
Yeah, I think we could spend a couple grand, frankly, on some barriers and on a tent, and helping them get some lighting and recoup that in rent. And Andrea, as you're saying, do it something that, in future years, once we're post-pandemic, whatever, maybe for the month of June every year, we let the restaurant expand out this way. I mean, if they could handle the extra seats, and their kitchen can handle the flow, I think they could, I don't know, I think it would be great. But of course, I'm pro restaurant.
Mm-hmm. It's like a 4-month street festival.
Yeah, exactly.
We got 4th of July.
But to Phil's point earlier, maybe there is a way to rent them, or maybe there's an unused portion of them just around the county from things being out of whack. Maybe Rockville or Kensington or somebody else has a bunch that we could, rent or borrow from them, because we may not have anywhere to store this kind of stuff if we're not going to use it beyond, say, September. Just a thought.
Are you talking about barriers? I'm sorry.
Yeah, for barriers.
Yeah. Unless we invest in planters or something robust and more.
Yeah.
That was discussed with with Donna. And so was the string lights. But I like the idea of the tent. That's great.
Yeah, no, the tent, because then the weather doesn't. Then they can really make money, because then it's not. You're not. You're talking about really evening dinner, and I assume lunches, and I guess if they're open for brunch, I guess they would open for brunch maybe. So it really wouldn't affect any CSX. Ones who've been taking the train these days. I'm not CSX, something. The MARC train. No one's even taking MARC these days, but it wouldn't even matter because MARC is all morning traffic for the most part, and then evening traffic will go out the other way. So.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
Okay.
This is just a suggestion if you're considering the tent, which I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that, but I would think maybe allowing them to take responsibility for the tent and just giving some sort of credit for it instead of the town taking on that responsibility and liability might be better.
I would think, if they're interested, it's all, there's a bunch of negotiation points here, and generally you're right. You got to kind of put it all on the table, and see which side of the fence each topic falls to. See, without a tent in this climate, it's outdoor dining space without some protection from the weather is far more useless than one might think.
I can believe it. Okay, well, these are certainly things then that we can keep under advisement, and when we get to that point where Black Market wants to have a discussion, Andrea will let you all know, and from there. Is that okay?
Good.
All right. Andrea, are you okay with this?
Good.
Yep,
All right.
sounds good.
So let's, I'm so sorry how late this is. Andrea, can you give a quick report from the
I
manager's
sure can.
perspective?
You bet. May revenues, operations, and capital budgets are at expected levels. Total revenues and expenses are within projections, so things are still looking good financially. There were a couple building permits that were issued. Those are in the report. COVID-19, nothing major to report there. Just continue to follow what the county's doing and kind of take our cues there. Town office and maintenance highlights. It's been a busy couple months. We have a new renewable energy supplier, and we were able to make some LED streetlight retrofits that were sort of a long time coming. The timing was right. The little stretch where they were put in, one of them was the pole that was hit by the drunk driver that was replaced, and there was another pole in that same stretch that the ballast needed to be replaced anyway, so we just did 6 in a row there as a kind of pilot. And then the truck's been ordered. That's it for me.
Great. Good news on the truck. If anybody, if we don't have any questions, I can adjourn. Is there any questions?
No.
Okay. I'm going to jump on it. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you, everybody.
Be well.
Good evening.
Okay. All right, you too. Bye-bye.